what we're doing is we're using free shoots to build up our experience, to build up our confidence, to show that we are out there making our own careers happen. The magic list is a very important part of that because you're researching everything in your market and everybody in your market. You know all the camera houses, you know all the casting companies, you know who all the producers are. You need to research these people so that you know what they're doing, so that when their name comes up, you've already researched them, so that when you get on these sets, you're the one that knows the most. You're an overachiever that's getting into the film industry. People love people like that. They want to refer people like that. All you're doing is a little bit more than everybody else, and you look like a superstar. And most people don't do it. It also kind of takes away the fear because you're like, look at this big industry all around me. These are my people. And these are the companies. And this is the stuff. It motivates you. When you are doing so much for yourself that you're not asking for help, then people are like, wow, you really deserve to get on this set. And since you're talking about it and you know about it, then they're going to think of you for opportunities. That's what just happened. They just do that. Like before you're like, hey, I've known you for 10 years and you never referred me. And then all of a sudden you talk about, that, oh yeah, there's this production company that has this going on and I'm production assistant now. And by the way, if you're brand new and you've never been a production assistant, you call yourself that anyway. It doesn't matter. That's what you are. You just say, that's what I am. Can you help? Can you solve problems? Can you do lockups? Yes, you can. That doesn't mean that it's not like, a mindless job. When you start off, you're doing the easier stuff. But as you're out there on sets and you have more and more capabilities, now you're doing more advanced things. Now you're setting up the Wi-Fi system for the video village and finding electricity and helping VTR get the monitor set up and maybe helping them set up a remote transmitter because Video Village is too far away and they've got the people mover now. So Video Village is in this big van that's a people mover and you're helping VTR get that set up and maybe you're helping sound do something. It's going to get much more advanced and much more that you're doing and much more that you're understanding. And of course, you know that in the film industry, you never say, I can't, or you never say no. You always say, okay, I'll find a way. We'll find a way. Yes, we'll figure that out. Yes, give me 30 minutes. Yes, give me 10 minutes. Yes, give me 2 minutes. So when somebody says, actually, this is a good one. When the AD says, hey, I need somebody to do this, don't say, and you know it's going to take you 10 minutes, like you really know, don't say, oh, that'll be 10 minutes. You say, 2 minutes, always 2 minutes. Remember that. It's never the actual time. Isn't that funny? But that's the way that it is. I have some notes from my last shoot that I wanted to share with you. Okay, so I was doing a job with 2 directors. So they're a directing team. They're lovely guys. I worked with them to give you some story about this maybe 6 years ago. And it was with a different producer that brought me in that I had worked with on another job. And this is the way of the world, right? So you work with a producer or it could be a production supervisor. And that's how you met that producer. And then they bring you in because the regular person is not available. This is the way of the world, the way of the film industry. So then you work with them and then the director's like, I like her. Let's have her be our mixer. And then there could have been somebody else that they were working with and they're like, oh, that they like Janet now. Because that happened for this week as well. For the job I have this week, I just got a new director that's now asking for me. And the other one, they're not calling anymore. And she'd been working with that mixer, who's a woman, for years. So anyway, this directing team, they are comedy directors. And it's so funny because one of them is the one with all the answers. And the other one, totally overpowers the other one. But the other one has ideas sometimes and always throws them in there, but gets shot down all the time. It's just the funniest dynamic, but it's super sweet. They're really good friends and they're super sweet. On this particular job, we did not have our regular first AD, Ed, who we always work with. And Ed is somebody that I've worked with for 20 years, totally by the books, nice, but runs that set, does things right. Becoming a first AD requires that you know a lot about how the set works. Like, to become an AD, first you work as a production assistant for probably 3 years. Like Stacy was going down that path, and she's worked as a production assistant and first team PA and walkie PA on all these big TV shows because she wanted to get her days in to become an assistant director. I believe she's recently changed her mind, and now she wants to go into art department, which she did not need to do all those PA days. She could have gone into that like in 6 months or even less. But if you want to be an AD, which is running the set, you need to have all those days in order to qualify for the DGA. That's the Directors Guild. So ADs join, that's their union. And in order to be a union AD, you got to get those days and submit and prove it with the Directors Guild to be able to get let into there. So you have to show your paycheck stubs and your call sheet with your name PAing on all of these sets. The reason why I say that is this is a first AD, and I have worked with this guy before, and I was trying to remember, he seems nice, but the name, I'm like, I think that I was having difficulty with him before. My initial reaction somehow was like, I remember us out in the desert on a shoot, and something was happening and he wasn't on my side. And so I told Tamara, I'm like, I don't know, there was something about him, but he seems like a really nice guy because he gave a safety meeting, and I'm like, okay, seems like a nice guy. He was a nice guy. He just wasn't on it. And so that's what I was taking notes on to kind of let you guys know. He was just creating situations where people were talking about him, where people had to find him. It's so interesting that somebody that's super qualified, that is a first AD, that's a DGA first AD, that means that he PA'd for at least 3 or 4 years. He second AD'd probably for several years, and then he became a union first AD and wasn't doing lockups. One of the directors, I'm not going to name their names, but he was yelling out, locking up the set. That's not his job. He's not supposed to be doing that. So he's yelling out because people were talking. So because the AD wasn't having the production assistants spread out and lock up the set and yell rolling and yell cut, people didn't know when we're rolling. So they're just talking and making noise and doing work and doing construction work. So the director noticed that and was like, the set needs to be more quiet. So he's like, we're locking up the set now, rolling. Okay, so that was one thing. Also, he was not giving direction to the background. So the director was doing it. Well, that's against the rules of the DGA. Now, I like to tell you all this stuff just for get it factor, just so that you kind of understand, just so you see what people know. Everybody else is going to know this and notice it on set. And it would take like a trained eye or perspective in order to know this. And that's what I want you guys to have. I want you to know, because they're running the set and you're working for the AD. That's why it's useful to know this. Yes. So the first AD, and this is on union sets. Non-union sets, there's no rules really. So you can have different things happen. And therefore, anything can kind of go. So just know, non-union sets, who knows? On union sets, first ADs, they are the ones to direct the background talent. So they usually will tell their second AD, who's working with the background talent, that, okay, you stand here, you cross then, and a lot of you guys that have done background, you know that, especially on a TV show, it's like a frickin' factory. Like, they have that thing down. They're super organized. So this would never go down on a TV show. Anyway, so he wasn't giving the background any direction. Also, it's against the union rules that the director directs the background talent. That's why if you worked on a TV show, the director is never directing the background. Have you guys noticed that? And then we couldn't find the first AD. And everybody's like, well, what's going on in this scene? What's happening in this scene? He's nowhere to be found. And the gaffer and the key grip and all these people were like, who knows? This dude, I don't know. They were like really dissing him. So now you got people talking about him on set. Not good. And when people start talking, even though people won't say anything, everybody hears it. Everybody's listening. Ed would have had all this done already. So Ed would have had the set locked up, would have had the background going right. The director was also cueing like movements that were happening on set. For instance, there was a tray that was rolled onto set. The director is cueing that. He's not supposed to cue that. It's all supposed to be done by the AD department. So here he is, instead of taking his focus off the performance, cueing the movements in the background. Unbelievable. Oh yeah, here's another one. A couple times we were caught like, holy shit, they're rolling. And they're rolling, cameras rolling. And it's like, last looks, roll camera. It was like there was no like last looks and then watching and letting actually people do their last look stuff. Last looks mean they check the hair, they check the makeup, they check the continuity. It's a last look before you roll. It's not last look and then roll like 2 seconds later. So that's what it was. Last looks and then rolling. Therefore, they're rolling. And we're walking out there with Tamara's walking out there with the boom. I'm like, they're rolling. I'm rolling. I'm like, I'm picking up on the radio mics. And we're just like, okay, get out there. And she's like, this is crazy. And so she's walking out there. I'm like, it's like a student film. But still, you don't have a bad attitude about it. You're just like, okay. Everybody knows this is not the way it goes, but okay. It's a 3-day job. They didn't fire him. He's just never going to get asked back. And I'm assuming, but who knows? That's not up to me. Then, we'd ask him a question, and we'd ask the first AD a question, because the first AD is somebody that you ask what is going to be happening, what's needed, is this person giving a line, what's happening, and then they go to, if they don't know, they look at the boards, they give their best assessment. But if they don't know for sure and you're asking them a question, it's their job to ask the director. Okay, it's not my job to go ask the director. The director doesn't want everybody going to them asking them questions. But at the same time, you need the information. Like, you need to know, in my case, who's going to have the line and what their action might be. This is just my department, but every single department has got very specific questions that they need to know. So you ask the first AD, and then they give you an answer. They might say, I'll come back with you with an answer, but that's their job, is to give you an answer. If they're like, well, I don't know, or you're just going to have to be prepared for everything, which that's a response I've heard, that's not a good AD. That's a weak AD. Now, I've worked with first ADs that don't want to ask the director because they don't want to always be bothering them. But that's a weak AD, because they need to get that information. And therefore, when you don't have it, everybody's just kind of trying to figure it out. And then it's last minute. And then they start shooting stuff and stuff isn't where it should be, or they got to do it over. Problems start to happen. I've also seen it happen where directors are intimidating, like Joe Pitka. And then the first AD doesn't want to ask him anything because they're going to get yelled at. This is very rare. Don't worry. Film industry is really nice these days. Really nice. And it really is. Like the bad eggs that were just so rude, you're not working if you're rude. Joe Pitka, he's not even working anymore. By the way, anybody here that's new to me, I talk about him quite a bit. Extremely famous. Extremely well respected for his work. Has done the biggest campaigns, $1 million days, $2 million days, working with Michael Jackson. I mean, the biggest celebrities in the world. A monster. And I can say that and not have any worry about it. Everybody knows that. Yeah, he's horrible. He is still alive. I worked with him 2 years ago by mistake because they had called me for years, and I'm like, oh, who's it? Joe Pitka? Not available. Not available. Not available. Oh, I'm sorry. Darn, I'm not available on that day. That's what I would say it. And they're like, okay. Well, this time they call me, put me on hold, and then it's like right before Christmas. And they're like, so Joe, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wait a second. Is this Joe Pitka I'm working with? Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, great. I'm like, all right, I'll do it, but okay. And then they're like, oh, we can't give you a boom hop, and you're going to do a process trailer. Yeah, process trailers when we tow around the car. The truck, the car's on a trailer, and I'm like, actually, I am not going to be working with Joe Pitka with no boom operator doing process trailer. That is a no-go for me. And they're like, but Joe doesn't want a boom operator. And this is actually his MO. Like, he doesn't want a boom op because I don't know why. He doesn't want to see that person there. That's the kind of person he is. He's crazy, guys. So Tamra, my boom operator, she used to work with Joe Pitka on all these big, huge things. And they would fly around the country, and she would have to be hiding in her hotel room so that when they were going to do sync sound, then she would run down there and get on set, and then boom, and then she'd run back to her hotel room because he didn't want to see the boom operator on set or really know that they had spent money on that. I don't know if it's spent money or what the deal is. Who knows? You never know what the deal is. But just to give you an idea of the last time that Tamara worked with Joe Pitka was when he finally got upset about the Comtex having interference, and he's like, you fucking get these fucking things out of here, threw out his headsets. So he was doing that on the shoot that I was on. He was calling people bitches and you worthless piece of sack of shit, horrible things, right? Anyway, I was just horrified. I remember I was calling Joe. We're on this football field shooting with these kids, and I'm just like, called my husband Joe. I'm just like, I cannot wait to get off of this shoot. I would like to leave right now. I can't stand it. Because what happened was, he's directing these kids. It's like 6 a.m. And I got my portable rig, so I don't have a boom op on that day because I'm basically just getting ambience. That's okay. His assistant was there with the car prep guy. This is for Toyota. And so they were just like watching what was going on. Like, they're interested. Like, everybody's hanging around waiting for us to get the shot, and the kids hadn't come out yet. And so he turns around, he sees them, and this is a Joe Pitka move. He's like, what the fuck you looking at? They're like, oh, just watching what the fuck you looking at? Get that fucking grin off your face. Who the fuck do you think you are? Horrible, right? It's that kind of like really bad, like Goodfellas, like it just makes somebody feel so humiliated. So he's doing that to his assistant and the car prep guy, and they're just like, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is so uncalled for. This is like they've done nothing. It's like, what is going on here? And I saw people that I've worked with for years, like the key grip, he's just like turns his back. He's just like, I hate it when he does this. And I'm just like, yeah. So this happens, and then they leave. And I'm just like this, So I'm sitting on my Apple box with my stuff, or actually, the key grip who turned his back because he can't stand seeing this happen. I'm like, hey, can you get me an Apple box? This is really heavy. So he's like, sure, Jan. Brings the Apple box. Somebody brings the Apple box out there. I sit down. I'm sitting in my Apple box. And then Joe turns around, and now he's looking at me. Now, you saw his picture, right? The guy's like 6'5". He's a big, hulking, horrible person. I mean, I had been interacting with him, and it was fine, but not great. Not like, hey, oh, nice to see you. And he's like, so, what are you sitting down for? I'm like, oh, well, Joe, this is heavy. And he's like, oh, it's heavy, is it? I'm like, well, yeah, this is very heavy. He's like, oh, you're sitting down because you're a girl. And I can't remember what I said. Actually, I do have this recorded where I remember exactly what I said. I recorded it with you guys. And I'm like, well, okay, whatever you want to say, but yeah. And so it's a little bit, and he's like, I cannot remember what we said, but it doesn't even fucking matter. It was just some kind of banter. And then he basically left me alone. And which is good because I don't really want to stand up to this guy and banter with him like this because I know how ugly it gets, and it gets very ugly. Anyway, so then we did that shot, and now we're walking off the field, and I hear him go, give me a pink apple box. And I'm just like, pink apple box, huh? Weird. And so I just kept walking. And then all day I'm hearing, did you get the pink apple box? Where's the pink apple box? What is it? How about the pink apple box? I'm just like, what's the deal with this pink apple box? And then at the end of the day, we're shooting at a stadium. And the production designer, the head of the art department, comes up to me and goes, here, Janet, Joe wanted us to give you this. I'm like, what's this? And she's like, it's a pink apple box. She's like, you would not believe this. We have been hunting all over. We did not know what this pink apple box was for. We kept like painting it like pink and fuchsia and kept showing it to Joe. And he's like, not pink enough, not pink enough. Make it more pink. And he's like, so finally we got this thing done and he wanted us to give this to you. Here, it's yours. I'm like, what? This is an old apple box. He got this apple box from like the Grips and then he's like, just charge me for it. Get the art department, paint it pink. So he's not even around. I don't know. They give me this apple box. And I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of clever. I mean, that's kind of sweet. Now, now these people, this weird thing about dynamic about Joe Pitka, he is extremely talented. He has done the biggest stuff. I mean, okay? And these people have been with him, many of them, for many, many years. So, like his production his makeup artist, she's been with him for years, and she's like, he's actually a nice guy. The VTR is like, he's not so bad. The script supervisor's like, when you understand him, he's all right. I'm just like, I saw what happened. He's an ass. Anyway, so the makeup artist is, she's like, Janet, you got to get him to sign this. I'm like, I don't really care to have him sign it. And she's like, no, you got to do it. I'm like, okay, let's go. You and me, we'll go get him to sign it. So she comes up and she takes the apple box. She's like, Joe, come on, sign Janet's apple box. Sign it. And he's like, okay, where's the Sharpie? And he signs it. So he signs it. To Janet, best wishes, Joe. Right there. Okay. Now, I tell the Grips, I'm like, hey, he signed the apple box. They're like, that's amazing. He doesn't sign anything. I'm like, they're like, save that. That'll be worth a lot of money. So I'm like, okay. And I got a story. So then I come home and I'm like, this day was so horrible. I can't, but well, Joe gave me an apple box. Joe's like, my husband's name's Joe. He's like, what? Like, yeah, he painted it, had it painted pink and gave it. He's like, I would have been fired off of that set immediately. And you come home with a pink apple box signed by Joe Pitka. That's crazy. I'm like, yeah, the AD on this thing, he berated him. He's like, get the fuck out. We're shooting in this hospital room. Or the AD is trying to do his job. You know, Joe, do you want this? Is that where they bring this? And he's like, you call yourself an AD? And I don't need to go into it, but he's just like, get the fuck out of the room. And the AD had to go outside the room and couldn't even be in the room with Joe while he was directing the scene. It was like ridiculous. The guy did nothing wrong. He was just trying to do a good job. And and he's worked with him for 20 years, so he's been berated for 20 years. This is just the Joe Pitka. I think that was the last job he ever did, hopefully. They didn't call me again. In fact, nobody from that production team ever called me again. Because I said to them, I'm like, I'm never working with him again. That was a horrible experience. And they're like, we love him. So they never called me again. So there you go. I got blacklisted. Yay! Who cares? Yeah, right? Okay. So that was my, that story I wanted to tell you. Okay, I got another one. This one is kind of cool.